Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your attendance today. I'm Patricia Alonso, editorial manager of books at Common Ground Research Networks. And welcome to the book presentation of today. We are presenting Holocaust Education and the Semiotics of Others in Israeli Schoolbooks. One of our new releases this year, Nurit here, Nurit Elhanan-Peled is a retired lecturer in language education in the Hebrew University and the David Zellin Academic College in Jerusalem, Israel. She has studied the various aspects of Israeli discourse of education and published, edited, and wrote several books and many articles about classroom discourse, oral and written language development at the school, and racism in Israeli education and discourse. It's a pleasure to have you here today and be able to learn a bit more about your work, Nurit. Well, just first, we'll start with Nurit's presentation, and at the end, there'll be a few minutes to talk, ask questions, any comments, thoughts. Do you want to share something? So, Nurit, if you want to share your screen.
Okay, thank you very much, Patricia. So first of all, thank you so much for having me and inviting me to present this work. And a million thanks to Common Ground Publishers for publishing this book. I will go straight away to the PowerPoint, and I will talk while showing the PowerPoint. Wait. All right, you see it? Very good. So the book's name is Holocaust Education and the Semiotics of Othering. I'll start with the background and methodology. The methodology is, since all the questions we always ask in discourse analysis are social, the best way to study such a subject is social semiotic study, because social semiotic principle is that meanings and knowledge are made in signs motivated by interest and ideology in a given culture. The analysis itself is multimodal, and it studies the transformation of verbal and visual signs that are transposed from history books or from Nazi archives and private collections, and are recontextualized in education. For example, one photograph that can be evidence of success in the Nazi archive will be evidence of crime in the Nuremberg trials, and then will be figure of memory in the museum and teaching material in the school books. And with the function, of course, the meaning changes as well. First, I'll say some things about Israel, for those who don't know. Israel was founded in Palestine in 1948, and it has a population of about 9 million. The Jewish population is made of immigrants brought by the state from Eastern Europe, Muslim countries, the former Soviet Union, and Ethiopia. 20% of the citizens are Palestinians. They are called Israel's Arabs, and they are discriminated by law. In addition, 5 million stateless Palestinians live under military occupation in territories conquered in '67, with no rights at all, no civil rights, no human rights, nothing. So scholars they define Israel as a settler colonial ethnocracy, which means that one ethnic group, Jews of European origin, dominates all other ethnic groups. Now, a very important and a key to understanding Israeli education and Israeli attitude to the world is the interpretation Israel gave to the post-Holocaust slogan, never again. Israel interprets never again to us, not to everybody else. And that means sacrifice or be sacrificed, kill or be killed. These are the two options, the only two options, and this engenders the rhetoric of victimhood on one hand and of power on the other. In Israel, a new Jew was created by Zionism, And it was created against three groups of others, and I put it chronologically. First of all, against the East European studious, weak and pale diasporic Jews, who later perished in the Holocaust without resistance. These were despised Jews that we don't want to be again. This is what the first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, said back in 1939 already. The other group of others is the Arabs who have replaced, oh, someone has to, to close the mic. The Arabs who have replaced in Israeli eyes the Germans as potential exterminator of the Jewish people. Against Ben-Gurion defined them so in 1951. And the last group are the non-Western Jews who were brought to replace the exterminated European Jews and were considered as an inferior race in need of cultivation. So these are the three groups of others against which Israeliness is constituted. These perceptions have not changed in 100 years. Although, when you enter an Israeli school, you immediately see slogans, love the other, respect difference, and the other is me. And history curriculum has set as one of its objectives to promote understanding towards others. Nevertheless, in Israeli school books today, Palestinians are still conflated with German Nazis. In the chapter about the formation of Holocaust remembrance, the books, for example, this book, explain that in both wars and in terrorist attacks, Israelis experienced law, bereavement, and existential danger, which allowed them to identify more easily with Holocaust survivors. This way, they become the hereditary victims of Holocaust. And after the 73 war, the former despised Jews that I mentioned before, those who went like sheep to the slaughter and perished dishonorably, became the potential us who may perish again in the hands of Nazi Arabs. So Palestinian terrorist attacks are transformed from acts of resistance to Israeli occupation into heinous anti-Semitic crimes. Even in the final exam of matriculation in the section, the formation of Holocaust remembrance, the students had to consider terrorist attacks and explain their impact on the formation of Holocaust remembrance. So you see, it's all mixed up together until today. Palestinians are presented in school books only as problems and threats. In all school books, we don't have a photograph, one photograph of a human being who happens to be Palestinian, a doctor, a teacher, a writer, whatever. They are only the problems that you see here, and these problems, like the Jewish problem in history, must be solved. This is what the book says. The Palestinian problem is a problem that acts by itself. Nobody caused it and nobody directs it. It poisons our relationship with the world on its own. Therefore, Palestinians must be distanced, confined, or eliminated. The need for Jewish majority, which is the highest principle in Israel, because that means security, legitimates the killing of Palestinians. For example, a quote from a textbook: "The escape of the Arabs following the Deir Yassin massacre solved a terrifying demographic problem, and even a moderate person such as the first president, Weizmann, spoke about it as a miracle." The need for Jewish control over the whole land legitimates segregation of Palestinian citizens and military siege. And a civic studies book explained the military government helped Jewish settlement all over the country and prevented Arab seizure of vacant lands. The Arabs are also citizens, but they are not allowed. I told you that they're discriminated by law. And the vacant lands, of course, are the lands that were confiscated from them. So the destruction and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine is reported in school books, always only from its favorable consequences for the Jews. This is my previous book. No room is made for the fate of the survivors or for this testimony. How are these people represented visually as others in the school books? Palestinian citizens, the first thing or the main thing is what we call symbolic elimination. School curricula fail to take account of the history of Palestine since the Second Temple. They present the Promised Land as the provenance of the Jewish-Christian civilization while denying its Arab-Islamic history. The actual Arab present on the land is deemed inconsequential and consequently rejected to the point of obliteration. See, for example, this front cover of a series for young children called Living Together in Israel. If you look well at the picture, you will see that the people who live together in Israel are exclusively white Jews. No Arabs and not even Ethiopian Jews. This is another way of not showing them, an aerial photograph of Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza, which is considered the most crowded place in the world, but we don't see any people there. They are non-existent. Van Leeuwen defines this angle of photographing, the angle of the pilot who flies too high to be able to see the people on whom he's dropping the bombs. And of course, this is very relevant to Israel because Israeli students are educated to become this pilot. Another way of not showing people is just taking them out of the map, what is called geographic silence. This is a map of Arab population in Israel, and you don't have one Arab city depicted on the map, not even Nazareth. The West Bank, where millions of Palestinians live under occupation, is designated here as an area for which we have no data. So maybe there are no people there at all. This book shows a checkpoint as a means to defend our defensive democracy. But as you see, the checkpoint is empty of the people against whom it was erected. They are abstracted completely. Because they are abstracted, it allows the book to ask rational question. What is the purpose of the checkpoint? How does it represent our defensive democracy? What is the advantage, the disadvantage of administrative detention? The students don't see the things really, and they don't see this abstract enemy. They never see, for example, this picture, which is a real checkpoint. All right, and they don't see this, which is detention, or this. Another way of not showing people is by showing them through stereotypes. Stereotypes are always demeaning, always degrading, and always racist. This is one of the strategies of colonialism. So in this geography book, whenever Palestinian citizens are mentioned, you see this caricature of some kind of Alibaba who doesn't live anywhere. And the cartoon always accompanied by a very demeaning text, as you can read here. They are unwilling to give anything for the general good. So this is how Palestinians are represented in Israeli school books. Beside that, they are defined, they are Nazified whenever there is talk about them. Now I go to Holocaust education per se. In Israel, all Jews are united by what is called the chosen trauma, the Holocaust of European Jews. School children learn the narrative from Holocaust to resurrection, and this is the title of most Holocaust textbooks, in which the Holocaust becomes the distillation of history and Zionism its ultimate conclusion. It's like a story with a happy ending, with a closure. For example, here, teacher guide for second grade teachers, 7-year-old students. The students will understand that during the Second World War, the Jews did not have a state. This is presented as the reason for the Holocaust. The establishment of the State of Israel guarantees our security and safety. We are in conflict with the neighboring countries and with all the Arab countries, but now we can defend ourselves. This you can also hear in political speeches by the Prime Minister every Holocaust day. He turns to the Arabs and they say, you who wanted to exterminate us in the 40s. The annihilation of European Jews who could not defend themselves is described in detail in all the books. Holocaust historians say too much detail, because every gruesome detail of perversity is described. But the people to whom it was done are not described, are not narrated. The school books otherize Holocaust victims by a few strategies: the transmission of Nazi gaze, categorization, Zionization of victims, and anonymization. I'll show you the examples. Now, all scholars who study Holocaust photographs agree that you cannot show or display or discuss these photographs without their phenomenology. You must know who took the picture. Was it a Nazi, a Jewish, a prisoner, an amateur, or so on? The date, location, and circumstances of the photograph, the function of the photograph. Why was it taken? Was it commissioned for the authorities or whatever? The relationship between camera and subject. Were they forced to be photographed or not? And was it posed, staged, or candid? This is very important. I'll give you an example. This photograph was taken by two Nazi photographs from the propaganda company that was stated in the Warsaw Ghetto. The instructions to the photographers was to stage photographs that show that there are many, many rich Jews in the ghetto, and they don't care for their poor brothers and sisters. That's why the situation is so bad. Now, the school book does not tell the story of the propaganda company. They just put the photograph with the same title, Policemen and Citizens at the Entrance of the Judenrat building in the ghetto, without saying who took it, when they took it, or whatever. Now, the Judenrat is the Jewish council that was founded by, that was appointed by the Nazi authorities in order to help them carry out their policy of starvation and deportation. Now, if you look at that, you get the message that the Nazis wanted you to get. Two Jewish people who are extremely wealthy, and even this one with the oversized coat, and they pass by this dying man without even looking back. But I found in the archives this photograph that was taken before. And here you don't see the couple at all. You see that? Which gives me ground to assume this photograph was staged. And the traumatizing images of atrocity, which outnumber all other images in Israeli school books, are ruled by what Marian Hirsch calls the murderous National Socialist gaze. So Nazi perspective in such photographs and others comes across as objective and factual if we don't know the phenomenology. This is another photograph, which is very known, taken in the Ukraine. And the trajectory of the photograph is very interesting, but the school books don't mention anything about it. And they show it in its cropped version like that. In its cropped version, it became really the icon of what was called the Holocaust with bullets, before the Holocaust with gas. Okay? The school books use it in chapters that are called Searching for Alternatives to Direct Shooting or the Transition to Gas Tracks. Let us see one text. Below the photograph, we have this text. The method of direct killing had its shortcoming. It was slow, wasted a lot of ammunition, at least one bullet per person, and was hard to conceal. The method presented certain hardships as far as the German soldiers were concerned. The work was dirty, required direct contact between murderer and victim. This is why the Germans searched for more effective alternatives for the mass murder of the Jews. What the text says is that the method was good, but not altogether good. It had some hardships. This style that Shaul Friedlander, Holocaust historian, calls textbook style, bureaucratic, rational, factual writing of historiography, of business as usual, is quite chilling when it comes under this photograph. Another book even prompted the children to adopt Nazi logic when they asked what were the reasons that drove the Nazis to seek alternative to the direct shooting of Jews according to this photograph. This question appeared also in the matriculation exam in 22. And such writing leaves the viewers detached as far as possible from the sufferer themselves. Students are taught the bureaucratic thinking and industrialization of mass murder, along with the total indifference to human life and human expression of despair and helplessness. As if the text tells them, don't look at the woman, don't look at the baby. Look at the logic, at Nazi logic. One book described the transition to gas tracks, and it's the idea was to put the exhaust pipe into the track, and the track would go around and around until it was clear that all its cargo was suffocated and died. Now, the use of the word cargo, defining human being as cargo, is typical of racist discourse such as that found in reports about the slave trade, especially since the word cargo here is not put in quotation marks. The Nazis called the Jews cargo. In an interview with Gita Sereni, Franz Stengel, former commandant of the Treblinka extermination camp, declared that he regarded the Jews as cargo to be dispatched. So you didn't feel they were human beings. Cargo, he said tonelessly, they were cargo. Finding the same term in an Israeli Jewish textbook is quite appalling. Categorization. When you choose photographs according to categorization, you have to find the criterial feature. Here, the criterial feature, as you see, is the badge. You can see the badge? It is the most salient item on the double spread, right? And we have two people that wear the badge. This woman was photographed by Heinrich Jost, an amateur Nazi photographer who sneaked into the ghetto for a whole day and photographed wherever he could. This is what he says about her. This woman stood with closed eyes in front of a wall of tattered posters announcing a symphony concert and a program at the Café Ogrod. She was selling padded armbands with the Star of David on them, which every Jew was required to wear. She looked as if she was about to topple over and die the next moment. The Israeli Schoolbook says about this woman found herself a way to make a living by selling armbands. I would say it's almost cynical, but of course it's impassionate and with no apathy, with no empathy, with no sympathy, as if they say to the students, don't feel anything about it. She's not important. Regarding the little girl, the Schoolbook says, a Jewish girl from Germany with a yellow badge. And it proceeds in the same caption, when was the yellow badge used to identify Jews in the past? What's the difference between past usage and that of the Nazis? Again, prompting the students not to look at the girl, not to think about the girl, not to consider the girl. The girl happens to be Hannah Lehrer, 6 years old, who was eventually deported to Riga in Latvia and murdered there. Zionization of victims. In this book, the Shoah is told by poems and stories. And one of the poems is called The Boy Avram. The boy Avram comes back from the extermination camp, comes home to find his whole family slaughtered. The book dedicates 5 pages to the poem, and on every page we see this face. I don't know if you know this picture, it's very known, of a Sinti girl by the name of Stella Steinbach, who looks through the opening of the wagon that led her and her family to extermination. Why is she representing the boy Avram? Why is she Zionized? She has nothing to do with Israel or with Jews or with anything. I believe probably because this picture was given for free or something like that. But of course, it is complete disrespect for her. Anonymization. This photograph is very known. It is called Bloody Wednesday. In the town of Olkutsk in Poland, German police came to torture the Jews for a whole day, and then they invited this rabbi to pray upon them. And as you see, they tore and defiled his religious accessories and so on. The school book says a Jew wraps himself in his talit before being murdered. Now, this is wrong information. He was not killed on that day. He was killed 2 years after. And as Janina Struk says, such misinformation serves Holocaust deniers. But the school book turns Rabbi Hagerman into what the Nazis wanted him to become: nameless, voiceless, impersonalized, a unit in a category of many Jews like him. And then the caption proceeds to tell the story of another rabbi altogether from another place, Rabbi Doniel of Klem. They have nothing to do with each other, but it's like, you know, catching two birds with one stone. Doniel is not shown, and Hagerman is not narrated, and they come together with the same caption. Of course, you can write differently about this picture. Holocaust writer Katzetnik wrote on this picture. Okay, this is what he wrote. I couldn't take my eyes away from the face of the Jew. He was about my age. So many times had I been in his situation, but never had I attained such a state of transcendence. Just look at the serenity on his face and at those eyes. He looks down at the spot where he will fall in another moment. His hands are folded, defying description, as does the light beaming from his bare feet. So, of course, schoolbook writers cannot and should not write like that. It just shows us another attitude towards the Jew. But scholars, as I showed you before, Friedlander says that writing in textbook style does not convey the horror, and it's even more horrifying. Dominic Lacapra suggests writing that involves affect and may empathetically expose the self to an unsettlement. And this is possible for school book writers if they want, which should recognize the fundamental inherent otherness of the individual who experiences the trauma. But despite the recognition of this radical and ineradicable otherness, it calls for a sense of empathy towards the sufferers. And of course, such writing would generate a similar mode of reading. The schoolbook writing that we saw until now does not generate any empathy. The schoolbooks are replete with horrifying photographs, which the Holocaust historian Hannah Jablonka called the pornography of evil. She's very much against it. She said, this is all we teach, the pornography of evil. Nothing is said about this photograph of the two pair of twins that this man, when he was 20, photographed in Auschwitz 2 minutes before they were put to death with an injection of phenol to their heart. But the question I ask is, why do they do that? What is the goal of presenting Holocaust victims in such a way? The goal is traumatization and revenge. The representation of Holocaust victims reveals an interest on the part of the writers and designers of the curriculum to punch the children in their guts, as the Inspector General Avraham Green declared in the 90s, to traumatize them and thereby guarantee their loyalty to the state of Israel, and not to let the fire of vengeance die out. That's what he said. However, this vengeance is not directed towards the German persecutors and their collaborators in Europe, but towards Palestinian colonized subjects and citizens who are, as we saw, Nazified. Another interesting thing is the way Jews from Arab countries who were Holocaust victims, they were not recognized by the state of Israel until 2010, because the state of Israel didn't want them to take their share in the reparation money. But the school books report about them in such an offhand manner. For example, a few hundred Jews from Libya were deported to several death camps in Europe, as if we don't know exactly. I mean, there's a way to know exactly where they deported. or Libyan Jews too were affected by the war. So the contrast between the detailed description of the suffering of European Jews and the following, and this laconic statement is striking and implies that quantity and provenance are the overriding factors that entitled Holocaust victims to be commemorated. Some books even want the children to decide whether the suffering of Tunisian Jews under the Nazis was a Holocaust. You can see this title. This is the title of a chapter, The Fate of Tunisian Jews, a Holocaust, with an exclamation mark and question mark. Very cynical. What is the lesson from all this? Israeli school books teach indifference towards the suffering of others, present Holocaust victims through Nazi perspective, and use the criteria of utility regarding the killing of Palestinians. They inculcate elitism, racism that comes from above, towards Jewish others in order to preserve our identity from all sorts of mixing, interbreeding, and invasion. In the last chapter of the book, I propose to deconstruct the official pedagogic narrative and introduce in a joint narrative, Arab, Hebrew, other versions and other interpretation, which Homi Bhabha calls performative, and are to be found not only in official texts, but in stories, art, folklore, social practices, and in the memories of people, especially those who are exiled in their own country and are expected to forget their history. Hence, the joint curriculum should be multi-voiced, polycentric, and abandon the ideological writing of history. A very good Israeli-Polish poet wrote, "Our Holocaust we cried, their Holocaust we didn't cry." The joint narrative would follow the principles of multi-directional memory, based on the interaction between Holocaust memory and other traumatic memories of slavery, decolonization, racism, and dispossession, such as the Palestinian Nakba, perpetrated by European Jews. The Middle East in the joint curriculum should be presented not as a hostile entity to be conquered, but as the cradle of all three major monotheistic civilizations that coexist on the land of Israel-Palestine, and as the cultural provenance of most Israelis. The joint curriculum should offer a dialogic discourse that calls for discussion, for openness, rather than closure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nurit. Well, I'm going to post on the chat the link for the bookstore if you want to check the book, with a promotional code of about 25% off, as we are part here of the presentation. And now it's time if you want to make any comment, ask a question. If you prefer, if you want to click to the hand or just turn on your microphone.
People are dumbfounded.
You can also, Stanislas, want to participate? You can also write on the chat if you want to say something. Yes, Stanislas.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised from this issue of textbooks, because it is also what we see in Central Africa, especially in Burundi and in Rwanda, how where there is some selectivity in the holding of remembrance ceremonies in textbooks. For example, we realized that some events of mass violence in the past, at least in Burundi, are not mentioned in any single textbooks, but we see stories of maybe military coups which are presented as revolutions and things like that. And there's also a situation where in Rwanda especially, where history actually as a subject has been scrapped from the curriculum and replaced by ICT. So these areas of similarities from two different parts of the world are somehow, in my view, interesting from an academic point of view, but also painful from a human point of view. That's what I want to say.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is not typical of Israel. We have the same thing in other places. India, for example, and Azerbaijan. I have textbooks from Azerbaijan, apartheid, South Africa, etc. I think that, and as in your case, these textbooks, if they are the only thing the students read, really prepare them to be the soldiers that you see in checkpoints in Gaza and in all those places in Palestine.
Thank you, Stanislaw. Anyone else would like to say something?
I am always curious as to why people from the
We don't hear you.
even let people like you, Nurit. You cannot hear me?
Now I hear you. Now I hear you.
Wow. Well, okay. I'm always curious because I follow many people on social media who report of what's going on in Palestine, Israel, and daily crimes committed and all that stuff. And I see the protest.
I don't hear you.
And the pogroms and the niceness against the government and all that stuff. You can't hear me.
Now I hear you.
I'm sorry.
It comes
I
and
will
goes.
type it.
Can you write it?
Yeah, that's perfect. Andre,
No
right?
way.
And we
Good.
can.
Yeah,
Really?
there are a lot of interesting comments in the chat. Yeah.
Yes, this is right. For example, Smile left a comment. I don't know if you want to say that loud or you prefer to read it. I prefer me to read it. Okay, so he wrote that he has worked on how Arabs are represented in American textbooks, and it's somewhat parallel. It is easier to get public support for the goal of a government with manipulated propaganda in a school, which actually is the purpose of public school. Nothing is free.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Saki. Nancy also left a comment. To read it.
Wait, Nancy wants me to say more about the Holocaust with bullets. The Holocaust with bullets was the first phase of extermination where in the Ukraine mostly, where soldiers were sent to just kill the people. And they killed them all over the Ukraine, about less than 500,000 people. And then they decided it was not effective. But what interests me was that when you ask an Israeli student today, why wasn't it effective? And why did they decide to pass to gas? They have to look at this woman and her baby and start calculating how many bullets for the woman, how many bullets for the baby, what if she runs, what if he falls, and so on and so forth. And also there was this, the instruction was not to waste bullets on babies because they'll die anyway when everybody falls on them. And all these things that the children have to calculate in their minds, like really become German Nazi soldiers. And also the fact that the German Nazi soldiers have agency in all that. And the victims don't. We don't know anything about the victim. We don't know anything about the Ivangorod. We don't know where it was. We don't know anything about the Jewish community there, their life there, this woman, nothing. Although this information is available. That's the point.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Nurit.
Somebody else tell me to read this comment.
Yes, there is another comment from Maria.
Akinan.
Maria,
Here. This is what you said, yes. You wrote it.
First, we have Maria's comment. It says that your analysis and explanation speaks volumes about what always strikes us, which is the total lack of empathy from Israeli, from soldiers to settlers to common citizens, towards what the state does to Palestinians on a daily basis.
Yes, now André Lefebvre asked,
Yes.
Why don't Israeli realize what's going on and so on? Because of that. Because of that. First of all, they are conditioned. As you see, this kind of education is very sophisticated, thorough, and long. Holocaust education starts in the kindergarten, 3 years old. And they really believe, if you read the testimonies of breaking the silence, they all say the same thing. I was sure that everything I do to Palestinians will save my country from another Holocaust, until I found myself aiming at the forehead of a 4-year-old girl. Okay, so it's very, very deep in their mind that we are on the verge of another Holocaust. All the time, the Holocaust is around the corner. And this Professor Jablonka, who said we only teach the pornography of evil, said we only teach that we are victims, and we raised in generations of students who don't know what normalcy is, normal relationship. There was no study about the impact of this education on children, but I'm sure it's horrendous. Susan Sontag wrote a lot about the one time she accidentally saw a Holocaust photograph, and it changed her life completely. She was in America, there was nothing to her. So you can imagine what happens when you are fed these things from 3 years old. Don't you think 75 years of Nakba create the condition of being hated, not for being Jewish, but for being war criminals? Yes, but this is not what they think, of course. Of course. Now, this new definition of IRA about the anti-Semitism is exactly that. When any criticism about Israel is considered anti-Semitism, and that's it.
Maria
Yes.
left another
Right.
comment.
Is it possible to deconstruct this? Can you elaborate on your proposal? Well, there were things before. In Ireland, for example, they deconstructed the textbooks and they changed the discourse. They changed the very words by which they describe the British or the Irish and so on and so forth. You have to do a lot of work. You have to change the perspective. You have to really change the whole discourse, the language, the register, the pictures. And you have, my idea was, and it's not only my idea, I have Palestinian colleagues who have the same idea, and we started it even before the 2014 onslaught on Gaza, and then we stopped. And there were many, many volunteers who came to do that, to tell the history of this place, not the history of Europe, the history of this place and of the Middle East. Israeli students don't know anything about the Middle East. They know hardly anything about their own country, about Palestine. They know hardly anything about Ottoman ruling for 400 years. The history goes until the Second Temple, and then we came back after 2000 years, and that's it. So you have to change a lot. and also really to consider that there are so many people, so many groups that live here, and each has their own history, not only the history of pogroms and wars and murder, but history of culture, of agriculture, of architecture, of art, of music. We can do a lot about it. This was my idea, and really we had a very nice group in 2014, but it was not to be.
Nancy asked if there are any presumably private schools that
Are there any schools that do present a joint curriculum like this? No, but there are schools, the Hebrew Arabic school, the bilingual school, just they make a very careful selection about what they teach. So in a way, yes, they have a different narrative, but not a different textbook. They don't teach Holocaust, for example. They don't teach all these things. And they celebrate the 3 religions and so on and so forth. Yes, but I didn't see a curriculum. Does your work on this affect the stability of your job? Many Israelis actually support my views. No, nobody supports my views. Very few people support my views. And yes, it has an effect, not that it matters so much, but yes. For example, when there are conferences about textbooks, I'm not invited. And my Palestinian colleague is invited. And she told me once that people asked, where am I? Because I'm known in the world. And the organizer said she wanted too much money, but to academic conferences, you don't get money. So yes, I'm completely banned on this subject. But again, as I said, it doesn't matter.
We are running out of time. There is time for another question. Anyone want to ask anything?
Something else? Wait, there's something here. No, I don't see.
Thank you so much to everyone for attending today. And thank you, of course, Nurit, for being here.
Thank you so much.
If you are part of the International Conference on Learning, the recording of this session is going to be uploaded to the conference platform. If you want to leave any other question or comment that you think later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.